Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar entitled The Document is Dead, How to Accelerate and Scale Development Using Digital Blueprints. My name is Tony Higgins. I'm the Chief Product Evangelist here at Blueprint, and I'm joined by Matt Dodgson. I'll let Matt introduce himself.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Matthew Dodgson. I'm the head of Global Solution Engineering at Blueprint, and today I'm going to be providing you some insight and perspective from our clients as they've worked with us to deliver value at their organizations.
Thanks, Matt. So let me start out with, and of course this is an RPA-focused webinar, let me start out with the promise of RPA, because there are lots of promises. And people have been extracting lots of value with no question from RPA. And there is a long list, and it varies depending on your source, but these three tend to be common across them. One is just speed to value. RPA really does represent quick wins. That's, the whole promise of it is that we're talking weeks and months versus years. Whereas in the past, we used to have to engage the IT group and everything seemed to be a project, and the projects were in phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3, and everything seemed pretty heavy. And IT, quite frankly, was, pretty overloaded organization, and they're going to be dealing with a prioritized backlog. They just very often never get to the things that so many of the business stakeholders need because they're smaller and further down in the list. And being able to empower themselves to deliver their own solutions on the business side represents quick wins. So that certainly was one. Another one was increased efficiency. Along the lines of what I just mentioned, not having to engage a separate group, or at least not having to engage them as much, being self-empowered, being able to distribute it across different lines of business represents improved productivity and accuracy, because we're not playing telephone tag with, trying to communicate requirements. We're able to implement our own solutions, or at least within a smaller group. And then finally, optimize cost. The ability to reduce the cost of routine tasks. So when you have, and there are so many tasks considered routine, repetitive, not terribly mindful, but it's necessary work that needs to get done, that can actually be offloaded onto what we're now calling digital workers. Being able to be built and fielded and deployed and operated through RPA platforms, representing a reduction in cost for those types of tasks, freeing people up to do more significant work. So these are just top three, and in many cases these are enough reason to go with RPA. There are more reasons as well, but these are some of the prominent ones. So even though there's so much potential, so much promise, with organizations who have gone down that path, started, knocking off or automating rather the low-hanging fruit, as it were, the obvious ones that, could be automated, could provide those returns in a quick fashion that were highly repeatable. Of course, we want more and more and more. We try to automate more tasks. We get more digital workers or bots. We try to go larger processes, more end-to-end, et cetera. And we start to hit a wall, or at least speed bumps, and start to encounter some of the negative effects. And these are just some, as reported by Deloitte and E&Y. Specifically, 63% reported by Deloitte of organizations not meeting delivery deadlines, and 50% of RPA projects are failing to meet their objectives, as reported by E&Y. And again, this is as we try to do more automations, as we try to scale it up to more complex automations, is when we start encountering these challenges, and the shine starts to wear off. So we wanted to dig a little deeper into that. And this is one representation we have of it. So basically, when we're talking about automating and deploying RPA solutions, we're really talking about automating work, obviously. So that's tasks or work being done by many workers. And to do that work, they're using systems through a user interface, et cetera. And then we make investments in an RPA platform, and what we're trying to do is automate those tasks. So step one is we first need to understand, well, what is the work that people are doing. What are those tasks? And there's different ways to collect that information, but most often still today what we see is things, very manual. We're doing interviews, we're talking to those end users, hopefully a cross section of them, because nobody does the same job exactly the same. Surveys, observations. We've even witnessed people doing, recordings with their iPhone of people doing their tasks. Pretty much anything they can get their hands on to just understand how are people doing that work today. So that's a lot of very unstructured, disparate data coming in from those observations and surveys, et cetera, and recordings. The other thing that people tend to do to try to get a good handle on current state or as is not just speaking with those users or end users who are observing them, but looking at and pulling in other information like the documented processes that these people are supposed to be doing, right? And a lot of the decisions that are being made by those people when doing their tasks are really because of policies that are in place or rules or controls or even regulatory obligations governing how people work. And that information is held in, yet again, more unstructured data, things like Visio diagrams, lots of documents, even spreadsheets, etc. So these are the kinds of sources that, the individuals, say subject matter experts, they go by different titles, to understand current state are drawing from. And then when they pull that information in, they have to make sense of it. So they have to, try to piece things together, reconcile it, stitch together a picture of what that current state is. Once they understand that, then they turn their attention to, all right, now what do I want it to be? Because in so many cases, we're not really trying to just replicate what people do. We want to make it better. So we want to optimize processes, maybe even transform them more dramatically. And all of that work I just described, pulling it together, analyzing it, stitching it together, and then designing the future state. What do I want the processes to be when automated by a digital worker? All that work tends to be happening today, again, with unstructured assets like documents. And one of the most prevalent documents is called a PDD, or process definition document. Very common. In fact, most of the RPA vendors recommend that that be the primary means of documenting or specifying what it is we need to do. So not surprised. Sure, this works for smaller automations, but when they start to scale up and get larger, and you start to bring in things like I say, rules and controls and policies in the organization and stitch it together, and try to apply this to larger end-to-end processes, this becomes very unwieldy, very hard to maintain, and especially when things change, that's usually when it all really cracks and starts to fall apart. So this is what we have observed more often than not as one of the issues that really drives those statistics I was just showing you. And so at this point, I'll turn to Matt and just say, is how does this mesh with what you've observed?
Yeah, and just to give some context, many of our customers, many of the folks that I'm talking to, while they don't have this exact set of documents, they're always centered around, a PDD or a design document of some sort. Now, the data collections, where they get the details of the process, tends to still be manual, even though there is a desire to go more automated. We have many folks who are starting to look at those, but a lot of them still do interviews. They take screenshots for the PDD, and all this, again, this manual stuff is kind of baked together in a document. And even more, the source of all that process information is still coming from Visio in almost all cases. That's 90% of the situation for most of our customers. And of course, all of those policies, the rules, which are kept in different systems, need to be pulled in, and some of those they're being built by themselves, built by the individual groups, individual teams as they go through this. So there's a lot of manual, hard work, and complex work that's being done.
Okay, thanks. The other thing I wanted, and which is actually on the next slide here, is just to recognize that the landscape is changing somewhat, and one area that's under change is on the left-hand side, and that is how we're identifying or gathering data about current state. And as I mentioned, still today, most of the ones we see is manual, but it is changing. There are specific categories of tools now being applied, specifically process mining and task mining. Some folks call it discovery. But the process mining, they vary, but to a large extent, they're parsing the logs of enterprise applications. And there's several examples. We've just shown some here. And another is task mining, where we're actually recording what the user does, at the keyboard and mouse, and taking screenshots of how the system responds. So recording that actual interaction of the human with the system performing their task. So we can do those recordings and mine that. And in both cases, that's a lot of data, hence the word mining. And that's why they call it mining. It really is a data analytics job that's being done there. But at the end of the day, it provides far more coverage, looks at all the different, edge cases that are happening. And you get, of course, statistics, how long it takes people to do those tasks because it's being recorded, and also how often they do it, the frequency, et cetera. So lots of good things happening there. And lots of issues as well, but I'm sure they'll get sorted. But that's something that's evolving. So I'll turn to Matt one more time. Are you seeing this very often?
Yeah, so we don't see a lot of mining tools, but there's a lot in terms of in production, but there's a lot of pilots and proof of concepts going on. In many of the organizations, there's actually multiple that are being looked at, and they tend to cover those two different, or multiple areas where there's process mining tools that are being looked at, as well as task mining solutions being looked at in parallel. But the interesting thing is it's almost, a lot of these organizations are facing the opposite problem, where today they suffer from not enough information and it's hard to get. But what they're finding is that these tools are producing too much information, and it's really hard to sift through, and they're really having a tough time, at the opposite end of the spectrum with making, getting a kind of good signal to noise ratio. But they'll see. That's kind of the challenge right now, is how informative these solutions can be to really drive a lot more of the automation focus.
Right. No, very good points. And I guess the final point I'll make before moving on is that I already described the issue that we're seeing in the center, which is analyzing all the data coming in and figuring out current state and then designing the future state. To your point, that just exacerbates the problem because these tools are really good at producing lots of data. So it makes the center job even more difficult as we try to analyze and design. So the next thing, Matt was good enough to provide actually some slides of some actual automations that has been encountered, and I'll let you speak to these. And we're going to use this as kind of the basis
Yeah.
for drawing a comparison of how Blueprint would handle it. But I'll start with you. Just tell me when you want me to advance.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an example of something that I was working on with a customer. They specifically, here's an example of something they were building in Blue Prism. This is obviously, some of the information that they'll commonly have, but this particular one, there was obviously a workflow that was being put together with multiple tabs. And if you flip to the next slide, there's typically, in this case here, there was, many sheets for one automation. There's many tabs to help break down, these tasks into more detailed steps, and the individual tasks. For this session, we're actually just going to look at this one page. It's pretty straightforward, but obviously they tend to get much more detailed and very busy. Now, if you look closely at this process, you can actually see in the middle, we actually check for residency. In this case, it's being checked for a UK resident. And after the robot checks for something called ISAs, and then their branches depending on the results. So what's interesting, and if you actually flip to the next slide, you can see a bit of, here's the PDD we actually used to create that bot. Now, this was created by the business stakeholders, facilitated by subject matter experts. And as with most PDDs, the process to be automated is captured in this tabular form, that describes the different user actions. There's screenshots showing what the system should look like in response to those actions. This is very typical across the different automation groups we've been working with. The use of the PDD, that is. Now, the process you see here is one that was attempted to automate in Blue Prism, in the Blue Prism diagram we just showed. Now, here you can see where we are actually checking for ISA. And before that, we're checking for age, not for residency, as it is in the Blue Prism process. So this is a very simple example of the types of issues that this customer was facing, and that continue to happen for many of our customers. Things are kind of things are missed or evolved between the process design document and implementation for a variety of reasons, including simply just being missed in the human element. But this is just normal. We know it's going to happen, and they knew it was going to happen. They, though there was a lot of hard work and reviews that went into this, a lot of these things are caught, but some always ends up sneaking through. And this was just one example of it. And there's not much that are not much folks have really found that they can do about this, no matter how many sets of eyes you put on it, just the nature of trying to review that document. Now, another source of error, which caused them a lot of problems, is the various rules, policies, controls, and even regulatory obligations. Many of these things applied are on the workers' shoulders, where humans were, doing the work. They've trained people on procedures and had humans checks and balances. It wasn't perfect, but they got by. Now, in the rush and excitement of having robots to take over this work, there hasn't been a lot of thought or checks to ensure that all these things that are covered off by humans are actually being mapped into how the digital workers are doing things. In something that that this is something that the customer was specifically working on, but again, there's not much that they're able to do about it. They try to capture in the documents and ensure it gets factored in, ensure it's not missed. What's really hard though is dealing with the updates. So one of the biggest challenges this customer was facing was dealing with the updates when any of those rules, policies, or regulations would change. They didn't know the automations would be effective. Sometimes the change is happening and people are talking about it, but they don't know which automations are going to be affected. And this is a really, really, really big challenge. I put this one up because this is an actual one that did change, and they lost track of the robot that they saw earlier was actually affected. One day it was noticed, and after that it was excluded a whole bunch of the applicants incorrectly. So that's the challenge with the digital workers, is when they stop working, they just suddenly stop, and it's not easy to kind of trace that down.
Okay. Thanks very much, Matt. Basically, what I'm going to do now is show you what we would do with Blueprint just right out of the gate, and then I'd show you, in a moment, how we would do it from scratch. But even with the bot you just showed, for example, this is Blueprint, by the way, for those that haven't seen it before. And Matt was nice enough to provide us with the exact same process. And what we're able to do, first of all, is we can import from any RPA platform and other sources. But in this case, we're going to pull in from Blue Prism. That's the platform that the bot that Matt just showed was in. So Blueprint is able to reverse engineer, as I say, bots from any of these platforms, and we can in fact forward engineer to any platform as well. So we become kind of a generic layer above any set of RPA platforms, if you will. But this is the exact same process that we have reverse engineered. You can see the ISA is ready step, or check for ISAs rather. The UK resident, I mean, I would argue, had you built this in Blueprint from the first case, you wouldn't have missed the age one, but we'll see about that. The first thing that you're able to do, again, is bring it back. The next thing I want to focus on is with Blueprint, what I'm able to do is click this button over here, and that invokes what we call intelligent recommendations. So that does a semantic-based search across our repository of processes and other things like policies, rules, regulations, to find things that have a high probability of being applicable to the process in question. And so it's returned a few things. Now we could go click on these and go investigate, in this case, a policy and a rule, et cetera, to see what applies. But if we make that decision that, yes, indeed, this does apply, we can just select these and then automatically with a click, link them in. So now that policy and rule are tethered, if you will, to this process. So should the policy or rule change in the future, we'll know exactly what processes are potentially impacted, namely this one, or this being one of them. So that was just something we can do immediately with processes, or robotic processes you've already built that are in production. We can reverse engineer them and instantly start to provide value. But if I rewind and just say, look, how would we do this from the beginning? Let me just show you some of the capabilities of Blueprint. to facilitate that analysis and design activity for robotic processes. So first of all, we can start at a very, very high level in Blueprint. In this example, I'm starting with the customer journey. Again, from the perspective of the customer. And of course, we want to facilitate and support that at every stage of the journey. So of course, what we do in the business needs to be aligned with that. So you can look at these phases or stages. We have them laid out hierarchically, so everything's nice and organized. We can drill in this case, I'll just drill into onboarding, so we can see the details of the work that is needed to be done by the various stakeholders in the company to support onboarding of a new customer. In this case, in the banking sector, it'll involve know your customer, KYC regulations, and many other aspects. But that's the first thing that we're able to do. And of course, that decomposition can continue. So we can continue to drive it down. There's no limit to the number of levels we can drive down in terms of level of detail. So I'll just turn to Matt real quickly. Have you seen or witnessed folks drawing out their processes, at higher levels to facilitate automation at the more detailed level?
Absolutely. This happens every time. And they actually look a lot like this. Many of them follow strict, guideline or strict notation rules like BPMN. But some groups honestly just capture process in, a very organic way, just with how people are accustomed to drawing things.
Okay.
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. What I was going to say, the other thing is they're just to give you some context, what we were talking about before, they're all in Visio,
Right.
which is a whole other conversation. Trying to maintain them becomes this huge overhead because usually they're created on the fly and then they're not updated and they're just stuffed into a SharePoint site or a file repository somewhere and only pulled out and dusted off, months or years later.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. And as we were saying earlier, what we're saying is, as folks accumulate more and more and more of those diagrams, but really it's hard enough, but really as those things start to change or things around them start to change that impact them, that's typically where, people can't keep up, if you will, and where the value of Blueprint comes in. So one thing I was just about to show
Absolutely.
is as you decompose these processes and get more and more detailed, it's along that journey that you start to make decisions about what am I going to do with this aspect of the process. I've picked on one thing here, just selected it, but any of these you could, make the choice. Am I going to keep it a manual process and just optimize it? In other words, maybe reduce steps from, 15 to 10, or do something different? Or am I going to automate it is another choice you make. So for purposes of demo, let's say I take this risk rating approval, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a robotic process. So we can designate it to be a robotic process and then drill in to specify its detail. So it's at this point that we call this, this is unique to Blueprint. This is what we call a digital blueprint. It's a very powerful diagram. First of all, it's very simple to collaborate on. Anybody can understand this. There are only, two shapes, and it's very intuitive, but it also has a lot of power behind it, which I'm going to show you.
Yeah, just one thing to chime in here, Tony, if you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of reinforce, this was an area specifically that a lot of customers were very eager to understand. Essentially, they have these processes and parts are automated and parts are human. One of the common things they're always asking is, does this mean they can flag parts of the process that can be automated with RPA and which parts are human so they can start to kind of organize them and keep them sorted?
That's exactly what this is. So it's kind of a big picture view. And as you think of end-to-end processes, right, in a business, they span a whole lot of, business functions. And again, some of those are very amenable to automation, others not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it will be a mix of human activity and hopefully as many automations as we're able to do. But in Blueprint, you can do that allocation and maintain it. So basically what we'll do now is show you one other thing, is that if you recall in that PDD document that Matt had shown, which is pretty common, people usually express in the document a process which is a set of rows in a table outlining the user actions, but also the system reactions in the form of a screenshot. Well, Blueprint's able to capture that as well. So here's the user actions, the big box, the small box, or the system reactions, and we can even show the screenshots as well. So all the information is captured, but in Blueprint, I can expose it or hide it depending on what I'm needing to do at that point in time, but it's all there. The other thing that Blueprint's able to do is associate or tether, um, like I showed you before with the policies and regulations, things like that. But that, there really is no limit on what those could be. So again, business rules, regulations, policies, controls, or non-functional requirements like we're seeing here. So
Yeah, not
all of,
to jump in on,
yeah,
sorry,
go
Tony,
ahead.
not to jump in on you, but I wanted to kind of echo something that one of the customers had commented on. We were going through this, and they basically said, that this diagram pretty much replaces the heart of the PDD, which is the process. They wanted to confirm that that was their assumption,
Yeah,
um,
good point.
and obviously, absolutely.
Yeah, and that was our intent when building it. I mean, we're basically saying digitize the PDD. It's well beyond the time to get out of documents, which are a very poor means to manage information. And being a digital platform with a database behind it with versioning and the ability to maintain things and track things and have audit and so on and so forth. And that's what Blueprint really is. And this being an example of that. The other thing we can do is add additional information if relevant. So for example, I have this Know Your Customer or KYC risk assessment guide that is applicable to this aspect of this banking function, which is assessing risk ratings, for example, and we don't want to miss that. The other thing is, again, we can have traces at a very precise level this time. So for example, whereas that attachment and the other links that I had were to the process as a whole, in this case, this regulation dealing with an authentication policy has to do with this very specific step, which is looking up risk in a system. So we can basically have these relationships to a very fine level of precision. So I'll just ask Matt, is this something you've encountered or seen as something that's valuable to folks?
Yeah, this is one of the areas that every one of our customers and clients we've worked with are challenged with, which is, every one of their bots have some dependencies. They can't get away from it. And some of them are just, they're littered with dependencies and regulations at every corner. And keeping track of those just turns into really a forensic exercise when the business change happens, and then ultimately starting to, dig up what processes, automated or human, are actually impacted by that is a whole other level of work.
Right. Yeah, I mean the most frequent, tool I've seen used for this is quite honestly spreadsheets. People trying to maintain linkages through that means, which
Absolutely.
we can all picture what that's like. The other thing is that having it in a platform like Blueprint means you can collaborate with people. So there's a whole discussions area here, once again, with a level of precision. So this conversation happens to be going on about this particular aspect of the process. You can also have conversations on the process as a whole, but any specific step, you can even have conversations. And the good thing is you can bring anybody in. It's email enabled, so one of these people could be, interacting or in the conversation using their device, their iPhone, for example. And then also these are recorded. We can close them off, right? When closed, it's kind of pushed to the background, but it's never deleted, so we can always refer back to them at a later time. And really what these represent are these discussions, and once they're brought to conclusion, these are the rationale or the reasons why we made the decisions we made. In other words, how did we get to this diagram? And very often you'll find that's captured in these conversations. So it's great for, after the fact, new people coming on board to get familiar, or even referring back and again answering that question, why did we do this?
Yeah, and I can provide some detail here, some testimonial from a few of our customers. Um, they, they have been floored by, having this level of background information captured directly beside the process they're automating. They're used to revisiting these debates so many times, and they've seen a huge just value in not having to constantly dig through email archives or conversation chats to figure out what they discussed and rehashing those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the other thing we wanted to go through just before we move on is the fact that since we're on the right-hand side, just to show you that there's also version history. So everything in Blueprint, including this diagram, whenever anybody changes absolutely anything about it, it captures a version in the background. So we can always go back in time, see who did what, when did they do it, and we can go back and look at those old versions. What did it look like back at that time? And even revert to it as well. If we want to roll back time, that's a possibility as well, and do comparisons and so on. So that's the kind of thing, I mean, it's just unheard of in if you're keeping your information in document form, for example. So once we've done this, and we've gone through a whole lot, so this automation that we've specified, it's aligned with the higher level business processes, so we know where it fits in, even all the way up to a customer journey and how it supports that journey. It's accounted for all those enterprise dependencies and constraints, things like regulations and standards and policies and non-functionals and so on. And we've arrived here, in a collaborative fashion with our colleagues, as you mentioned, or as I showed rather. What we're able to do now is automatically transfer this now to your RPA platform of choice. So in this case, I'll pick Blue Prism yet again to keep the common theme, and we can push this over to Blue Prism. So once it's over there, we can log in, and here we are in Blue Prism, and we can see essentially what has arrived. So this is the information that we pushed over. If we open up, we can see here's the process, exact same process, just rendered and drawn how Blue Prism draws it, but it's the same information. So, and this is a pretty straightforward bot, but they get obviously more complex. So the first thing that the recipient needs to do is understand it. So they, of course, can, read this. But another thing they can do is follow this link back to Blueprint. And one reason you'd go back to Blueprint is to hit this button, and it transforms it automatically into a storyboard. So with Blueprint, they can understand the process through this means, as well as just reading the process diagram, which is a very powerful way to do that. So would this be something that you believe the customers, or you found the customers have found usefulness in?
Yeah, this is an area that they've seen huge help in bringing the business folks and technical folks together to really align them, especially now with everyone being kind of remoted out to their own home office. This is the kind of thing that's central to actually driving a review process. Actually,
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. So the other information, just to finish off, that we provide automatically down, and this is again what we call the digital blueprint, which is that process and all the details around it, but all the supporting information. So recall we had a couple of non-functionals related, so they're here as well. And basically they provide a link back into Blueprint. So if you navigate that, it'll pop up a Blueprint window giving you the details of that non-functional that we need to support in that automation. So these are, again, are things we don't want to miss when we're building it, because they're going to surface at some time, and we want to deal with them when we're building the bot, not have them be surprises once it's out in production, for example. And it even handles those precise traces. So every step that has additional information will have a folder. So this particular step about looking up risk, if you recall, had that trace to the authentication policy. Once again, we can follow that link to see the details of that policy as well. And another thing that Blueprint does, in addition to providing that digital blueprint, again, guaranteed to be aligned with, higher level processes and account for enterprise dependencies. The other thing Blueprint does is automatically generate and provide tests. So with any of the processes, Blueprint's able to automatically generate functional tests that have 100% coverage of the bot process, but also it generates acceptance tests in the form of gherkins that you can drive test automation through technologies like, Cucumber or SpecFlow, for example. So Again, these are automatically generated from the processes, so there's no added work, and they of course can be provided to whoever is going to be testing those automations before they go to production. But also, we found the developers can benefit from these as well.
Yeah, and it's worth. I think it's worth saying, back this up a minute and really explain where those tests come from, because I've had, a lot of folks that are so focused on the automation and getting things built that when it comes to validating that things were built correctly, it becomes an afterthought.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So again, this information, and that's what makes these digital blueprints so powerful. It's embedded in the structure of that digital blueprint and the information that's in it, right? So we reverse engineer, as I mentioned before, from the bots. We take all the information we can get from that and other, sources that I mentioned, but embedded in that blueprint, both, that's why it's a structured diagram. From that is what we're able to use to generate this information. Because at the end of the day, that blueprint is a specification, and the specifications drive implementation. They describe essentially how the automation is supposed to work. So of course that needed to be provided to the RPA developers so they can make it do that, but also at the same time, that information in a different format, i.e. functional test format and acceptance test format, provided to the testing community.
Yeah, and that's super helpful. I mean, this is the kind of thing that really accelerates the testing for our customers. I even had one that basically said to me, "I didn't even know you could do this kind of thing, in technology." So they were super happy and excited to get this, made available to their team.
Right. Okay, let's move on. So basically here I'm going to show you something else where we can essentially log into Blueprint. Now we fast forwarded. Let's say we've built the bot, it's out in production, it's running along. And the one unfortunate thing that tends to happen with bots is they break for different reasons, changes in the environment, or they need to change and due to, as I said, changes in things like those enterprise dependencies. If corporate policy changes, business rule changes, it's the bots that are implementing those or needs to comply with those. So if those things change, the bots need to change as well. And part of the struggle is figuring out, okay, this corporate policy just changed. What automations in my large enterprise are potentially impacted? And that's not a simple question to answer in most cases that we've seen. So what Blueprint allows you to do when you log in is you can head over to the dashboards view, and we can have basically a running list of change notifications. So these are changes that have occurred to various policies, regulations, rules, and so on, summarized at the top, and we can use the top as filters. So I can say, just show me the regulations and only those that are of high severity. So that's filtered us down to this regulatory change authentication. So this is the regulation that has changed. If I click on it, it takes me immediately over to an impact analysis view. So Blueprint, as I showed you earlier, has all these linkages, all these relationships across the information. This is just a visualization of it from the vantage of that changed regulation. So very quickly, you're probably going to want to filter this down. I only care about robotic processes right now. So if I apply that filter, so with a couple of clicks, this shows me instantly, should this regulation change, these are the automations potentially impacted out of all the automations I have.
Yeah, and just to give you some, some context around that, this is exactly what our customers were challenged with when they need to understand the challenges with their dependencies, and specifically how do they figure out which automations are affected by their dependencies. And this, you know, they are basically saying this can instantly tell me where to go look for impacts.
That's exactly what it does. Basically leveraging those relationships I showed you before, and that's part of the key value of Blueprint, is being able to, because we're holding the information in a digital platform, because we're establishing and helping you find relationships and maintaining them for you over time, you can then leverage it and get the benefit. And here's an example of the benefits you can get. So knowing the bots potentially impacted, what we're able to do is alert the owners of those bots. Hey, a regulation's changed that may impact the automation that you are an owner of. So please, you need to go look at the change, see if it does indeed impact your bot, if so, how, and make remedy. So we can send that alert off. Now the various owners of these bots have now been alerted. I'm going to log in as one of those bot owners, in this case, Nancy Davidson. Nancy would go to her personal dashboard, see the alert that came in. So she's aware there's a regulatory change that may affect her bot. Not only do we identify the bot, she may own several, we identify the actual step in the bot that's impacted because, as I mentioned before, we maintain relationships to that level of precision with the comments that I applied. So we can use this information then to navigate into whichever RPA platform you happen to be using to that step level. So here is the step. It's the lookup risk and NCA rating system step. Here is the regulation or a link to the regulation that has changed, the portion of the regulation that changed. So now what Nancy needs to do, step one is, well, what changed in the regulation? Again, she can follow that link as before. Here is the current representation of that, what it is now. Well, what was it before? What changed? Well, Blueprint version controls everything. So we can go back in time, even do a red line difference. So with that, she can see precisely what changed. So now that she knows the source and nature of the change, she's in a position to assess how that impacts the bot, make any changes, redeploy. So that's really what Blueprint does. So and the benefits it provides, as opposed to what most people, as we said, are doing today, which is trying to use all this unstructured, data like documents to do that analysis and design activity. They're trying to essentially do everything I just showed you in the platform, but doing it with things like Word, Visio, Excel, and trying to keep a handle on that. And not surprisingly, as things scale up and it doesn't take long, that just does not cut it anymore. So effectively, Blueprint is digitizing that whole process from beginning to end. We have automatic integrations into these sources. And as you saw, we can automatically deliver these blueprints out to the RPA platform as a very sound foundation to start the RPA, to the automation implementation and the testing of the automations, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I can share is in every single one of the customers that we've, both brought onto Blueprint as well as Show Blueprint, this kind of transformation has been, huge for them. It's actually very unexpected. They didn't know that there was technology out there that could provide the support and really aid them in this gap, this challenging space. They've been constantly finding new ways of applying this and seeing where they could drive even more value as they start to extend the the benefits to driving that automated integration with Blue Prism, as well as generating test cases and getting a whole acceleration in that group too.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. And just to wrap it up, a couple of points. I've mentioned this term digital blueprints. I've tried to describe it and show you, but let me just summarize, because it is right at the core of what we do. It is really, I guess you'd say, the unit of value in the product ultimately. And these are these literal blueprints of the automation that you want to build with all the power that's behind them. So they're very accessible. They were designed to, designed for essentially non-technical people to sit at the table and collaborate. And what we found in practice is that tends to be true. Like I said before, literally it's two shapes on a diagram. We've yet to see anybody who can't sit down, understand, have a conversation, collaborate with others to arrive at the best optimal solution in terms of a process flow. So it's highly collaborative, especially when in the platform and we can converse with each other. There's even all the way down to formal review and approval process should your organization need that, even with electronic signature and sign off, all of the dependencies and related information, and it's completely versioned, as I mentioned before. But not only that, then we get into the automation side of it, and I showed you some of the power of these. The fact that we can automatically pull them in from other sources, including RPA platforms. Your existing bots can be pulled in, but we can also pull from process and task mining solutions. From these, we can automatically generate functional and acceptance tests. We can automatically, if you still need documents, we can generate documents from any or all of the information in Blueprint. And something I didn't show you is we can even generate user stories. There are folks in the RPA world that actually we've seen drive their implementations using a more agile approach with user stories, and we can generate user stories automatically from the digital blueprints as well. And again, just to finish off, we have integrations to the most popular automation development platforms out there. So Automation Anywhere, UiPath, Blue Prism, Microsoft Power Automate, and the list goes on. To net it out, the benefits that folks are experiencing is direct benefits to those actually using Blueprint to do that analysis and design activity or specification activity for automation, getting dramatic improvements just using it directly for many of the reasons I've shown you today. But it's not only that, there's indirect benefits downstream that I hope you can now appreciate. For on the development and testing of the automation side, because we provide complete, comprehensive, and precise digital blueprints with all the enterprise dependencies directly into the tool that they use to develop the automation, not to mention the tests that go along with it, all again provided automatically. And that becomes the starting point now for development and test, as opposed to, a blank sheet of paper or a PDD document. And then out into operations as well, where we can basically highlight and detect changes that are going on and show you instantly the potential impact, what bots are potentially impacted, and let those RPA developers navigate immediately right to the source of change so they can perform their work and ultimately redeploy a fixed bot. All of this adds up to essentially efficiency and quality improvements across the board when we're dealing with automations to net it all out. In the end, fewer break fix cycles, less downtime, and ultimately increase, business value at the end of the day, leading to customer satisfaction improvements. So that's what Blueprint does. And there's different things you can do, of course, visit the website, but one thing we're offering now is complimentary limited time offer for a custom eval and workshop, which is very scoped, time limited, get your answer fast. We can do it in collaboration with you. It's truly the best way to move forward. And to request that, just go to the link at the bottom of the page, blueprintsys.com/workshop, and you can submit a request for that, and we'll get back to you promptly. So with that, just want to thank you, Matt, for joining me today and providing the insights from the customers and prospects that you've encountered. So very much appreciate it.
Not a problem, Tony. Thank you very much for taking us through this.
Great. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.